To follow this next Capra Tutorials vulnerability definition video, Wind Vulnerability, you will need the Capra Vulnerability module. To start the exercise, 2 vulnerability functions will be added to the current functions library from the vulnerability functions database included in the module. To do this, click Open and then Search in Database. In the hazard type selection list, you should check that the hazard of interest is currently selected. If it is not, select the corresponding hazard and click Search. This list will be updated immediately with the vulnerability functions included in the database for the selected hazard. Now select the corresponding functions by clicking Add. When this is done, the selected functions will be included in the current functions library. The current functions library can be checked with the tools displayed in the Functions Browser drop-down menu. Another way to create a new vulnerability function in the Capra Vulnerability module is by clicking New, then Function, and then inputting the information Author, Function Name, and Description for the new vulnerability function. It should be borne in mind that the hazard type cannot be changed because each functions library is for a single hazard, defined when the first functions were added to the library. When Accept is clicked, the vulnerability function will be added to the current library and it will be available in the Functions Browser. Continuing with this tutorial exercise, an additional function will be added in accordance with the reference documentation. The above steps must be repeated with the new information. In addition to the created functions and those imported from the database, functions can be added to the current library from files on the hard drive. To do this, click Open, then Search File in Local System, and then select the desired function file to be added to the library. Parameter values for the current function are shown in the Modify Function drop-down menu. The last procedure must be repeated until all functions listed in the reference material have been included. To modify a vulnerability function, it must be located in the Functions Browser drop-down menu. Click on the graph or on Edit to load that function as the current function. This last step displays the function in the main window and loads the parameters values and additional function information into the Metadata and Modify Function drop-down menus. Here, the necessary changes to parameter values will be made for the vulnerability function for one-story buildings with a heavy roof and masonry facade. The method should be selected as vulnerability_1. Number of points that define the function should be set as 30, maximum intensity value as 100, intensity type as gust speed, and intensity units to km/h. The intensity for mean damage changed to 100 km/h. Damage change factor set as 8.1 and maximum damage as 0.2. Finally, parameters must be checked and the maximum intensity value adjusted to complete the illustration of the vulnerability function. In continuing to fully define the vulnerability function, a default human vulnerability function should be defined. The next step will make changes to the vulnerability function for two-story buildings with a heavy roof and masonry facade. To do this, in the Functions browser drop-down menu, it must be selected as the current function. The method should be selected as vulnerability_1. Number of points that define the function as 30. Intensity type as gust speed. Intensity units as km/h. Maximum intensity value as 100. And maximum damage as 0.1. Finally, the parameters must be checked and the maximum intensity value should be adjusted for a full illustration of the vulnerability function. To continue to fully define the vulnerability function, a default human vulnerability function should be defined. To save a function in a file, select the desired function as the current function from the Functions browser drop-down menu by clicking Save and then Function to Disk. A Save File dialog box is displayed where the path can be selected and the vulnerability function file name entered. The Capra Vulnerability module makes it possible to save all vulnerability functions included in the current library. To do this, click Save and then Library to Disk. This will display a Save File dialog box where the path can be selected and the vulnerability library file name entered. The module will check if vulnerability files exist at the path selected and will ask for confirmation to save them if required. This concludes the tutorial. Thank you.